Hey everyone, welcome back to the stream. This is Josh Justice, aka Coding It Wrong. And as I always say, after you've watched for a bit, you can decide for yourself whether you agree that I'm coding it wrong. We are well deep into this streaming series, Building for Mobile and Web with Expo. You can check out the link right there if you want some more detail about what we're building. I'll show it on the screen and give an overview in a minute as well. I made some good progress on some stuff in between the sessions. There were some things that were kind of duplicative of things we've already seen. And I wanted to make progress so we could do something new and exciting and different today. But I'm going to show you what we worked on. And then we're going to talk about what we're going to work on today. So let's just go ahead and look at the web page here. So last time we're building a link saving app called Firehose. It's an existing app and we're rebuilding the UI in Expo so we can deploy it to mobile and to web. Here it is running. Our first screen, you'll notice something new up here. I'll talk about it in just a second. But last time on the stream together, we in the midweek stream, a special time, we finished out the mark red feature by removing a red bookmark from the list, confirming the menu's dismissed. We implemented deleting a bookmark, so that's all in. I don't need to show that to you now. And we refactored by extracting some components, removing some duplication, and improving names. So now let's talk about what I did in between the sessions. In between the sessions, I added link adding at the top up here, so we can add a link. I hit return, I get a little animation up there showing it was added, and then it pops down and goes to the bottom. And one interesting note that the title of the web page shows up there. Also, if I posted in the link to this series, I just put in the URL, hit return, it shows up with the title here, Building for Mobile and Web with Expo. So that's actually something that happens on the server side. So our client just takes the URL, sends it to the server, and when the server saves it, it also hits the web page, pulls down the page title, does its best to figure out the title, and saves that on the record as well. Once we'll be able to edit the records, we'll be able to change that. But that's one of the nice things of having put that on the server side is even though I'm changing the client, changing the front end, we still get that functionality copied over. So that's great. Another thing that I did is I went in and added error messages. I see Fimion in the chat. Hello. It's been a little while. My friend from Atlanta area, leader in the Vue.js community and Python communities. So Fimion, really glad you're here. Let's see if we have some fun stuff to work on together. Please let me know in the chat if you've got time what you've been up to, what cool stuff you've been working on, and let me know if I can plug something for you. But we should definitely catch up in less of a chat mode, although I'm happy to have you here chatting as well. So error messages. I'm going to show this to you by turning off the APIs so that we no longer have a server. So what happens in the app when we can't hit the server? If I try to add something, hit return, I get an error that shows up here. An error occurred while adding URL. Great, that's good to know. What if I mark red? Well, the same error spot there says an error occurred while marking link red. And if I choose delete, an error occurred while deleting link. So we've got these error messages showing up. That's nice handling so we don't just get the red screen of death in development mode or just empty silent behavior from the app. So that was some good progress. And a few things changed in the code as well while I was working on this. So let me show you. One thing was I ran across a situation where the library jest-native was helpful. Where is that? Here it is. So jest-native has come about, at least I ran across it in the last year or two. Custom jest matchers to test the state of React Native. So this allows you to use matchers that are a bit more intuitive for things like checking in elements props, its text content, its styles. So let me show you where I'm doing that. So in the unread screen test, where we're doing a screen test here that's kind of thoroughly testing all the JavaScript code on the screen that we're on, there's one place here where I'm using to have prop. So expect new field to have prop value of empty string. So this is the most straightforward way that I've found to test the text within a text input. You can say new field.props.value, expect it to equal empty string, but this is just a bit more readable. Now, in the approach to testing that React Testing Library and React Native Testing Library use, you're often not, the first thing you should reach for should not be what components are there and what props do they have. But in this case, it's really something user-facing that we're testing. We're testing to see what text value is shown for this field to the end user. So I think that's a really good use case of jest-native. The other thing is, while going through my own tutorial, I remembered something that I had forgotten about. So I have made a website, reactnative-testing.io. I made this back in 2018 to kind of have a cohesive place to describe testing approaches within React Native. And just over this past week, I've gone and updated it, made some changes. So one thing I did was in a component test, I added in jest-native, so that's called out to there. Updated some styling and some changes with the latest versions of Expo and the latest versions of React Native CLI. And I made a lot of changes to the end-to-end test section. There's a lot of information here on different options for end-to-end testing. And on continuous integration, I actually took my notes out because the things I had working there are not working anymore. And getting things like detox running on CI is a bit harder. So I just kind of acknowledged that there. Maybe on a future stream, I'll look into getting that working. But while going through React Native testing IO, what I remembered was, or rather saw in there was, where is it? findBy text. So I had forgotten about findBy text. Because I'm not on a React Native project at the moment. It's been a little while since I've been on one. But if you go into React Native Testing Libraries docs and you look up findBy, findBy queries return a promise which resolves when a matching element is found. And you have up to 4.5 seconds to find it. So I changed places in the code. Let me show you the PR on that actually. So, and if you want to see more details, you can check out the PRs on Firehose Expo to see things that changed in between the sessions. I'll paste this in the chat. For anyone that joins in the chat that wants to check it out. But if you check in the pull request here, we'll see that I was replacing the wait for calls with findBy. And so this is just a little bit more straightforward. So instead of await, wait for, get by text, or some alternative to that, with an arrow function, we just do await find by text. So it's a little simpler, a little more straightforward. I think I have most of them are find by text. There's also find by label text. So that's removing that. It removes some uncertainty I have around wait for. Like, am I using the wait for API correctly? Should I not be returning something? One important note, though, is that findBy, to my knowledge, does not handle cases where something is removed. And so wait for element to be removed is still something that's useful in here. We're checking here. Here we do findBy text to make sure that mark red is available before we press it. But then afterwards, we wait for element to be removed, and that's still the same API to use there. So a bit of a refinement, making our code simpler, and if React Native Testing Library makes any improvements there under findBy, we'll get the benefit of them in our code. So that's what we did last time. There's something else that I was going to do in between the streams, but I decided to do it on the stream instead, and that's extracting some child components out into separate files. And I wanted to show the benefit that we get from using having the test coverage that we have, because I have added test coverage for all this extra functionality I've put in about error states and things like that. So we have this extensive test here for the unread screen covering lots of different scenarios. Oh, it looks like I got some unused text there, so let me remove that. Let me make a PR here to children in files. That's what we can call it. Let's make a quick commit here to say remove unused destructuring. It's called the Scout principle, and Martin Fowler references this in Refactoring. I was just reading that this past week. He says it's the principle of always leave the campsite better than you found it. And the same is true for code. As we're going through the code, we look for opportunities to clean it up and make it better, like removing unused variables there. And really, the refactoring I'm suggesting here is more of the same. So we have another way to clean things up. We have unread screen. It is our screen for this. It's currently the only main screen in the app right now, besides the login screen. And so there's not a ton going. It's not the most complex screen in the world, but there's a lot going on. We've got 200 lines. That might be very small for your project. It's very small for some of my projects, but it's very big for some others. And as we went through, we extracted some child components. So we have unread screen. Unread screen has some wrappers, and then it has a new bookmark form and unread bookmark list. New bookmark form is here, pretty small. Unread bookmark list is here. You'll see, I think these came in since the stream last time, the error message and the no records message. That was another case I handled. And then the flat list with an unread bookmark row under it, and the unread bookmark row is here. Now, if you're using a powerful IDE, like most of you are, like Visual Studio Code, you can just click around to find the definitions of things. I think I found that Sublime Text might let me do that. Yeah, it does. Well, that's very interesting. And yet, let's try this again. New book. unread bookmark list. That's fancy, sublime, catching up. And yet there's still a lot of scrolling required in this file. There's a lot going on. And so I would really like, I extracted these child components that are only used in this file as we were doing refactoring and trying to make things simpler. But I'm at the point where I'd really like them to be in separate files. Like I like the arrangement of them now, so I don't need them so close together to move code around. So let's put them in separate files. And our tests are going to help us as we do that. So we have our test and unread screen spec. Unfortunately, these warnings that are there, that as I mentioned before, even with that findBy change, I was not able to fix these warnings. So I'm doing my best, but it's not perfect, that's for sure, and that's okay. But this is good enough for me for now. But all of our tests are passing. And so as I remove and extract these components into separate standalone files, the test will give me confidence that I haven't broken anything. So let's just start at the start here. Unread screen is unread screen. Oh, the first refactoring I want to do, and if you've done much in React, you may have run across this, is I want to, and I better close my, I'm going to close my test because sometimes they get confused. So I have this unread screen file. What I want to do is create a folder called unread screen. And then I'm going to rename this file to move it into that folder and call it index.js. So unread screen index.js. And now that this is one level deep, I'm going to need to change these relative imports. So all of these paths are one extra level. So unread screen index, and this gives us a folder that our other unread screens files are going to be able to move into. I'll move the test in a second in a separate commit, maybe. We'll see. So when you think about navigation, you see we're importing unread screen from screen links unread screen. And so you might think I need to go to /index to do that, change that import. But actually we don't. So in Expo and React Native and Create React App and commonly in React build systems, if you have a folder with an index.js or index.jsx under it, or TypeScript if you're so inclined, it's the same as just importing the folder itself. And so what that means is that unread screen effectively becomes an interface, and the rest of the app doesn't care if it's one file or a folder with many, many files under it. And sure enough, as our tests run here, we see that everything is still passing. So this import is still working fine. So I'm going to make this as a first commit. I'm going to say change unread screen file into folder. And so that's going to give us space to make changes. I think I am going to move the test underneath there. Whether to name the test index or not is kind of confusing. And there's a lot of paths there. So let me hold off on that too. I'm going to hold off on that for now. Okay, so we now have a place to put our extracted components. So unread screen I want to keep in this index file and these functions, these action functions that are part of it. But let me move down. New bookmark form. That could even be pulled out into a custom hook if I wanted to. But new bookmark form, that would be a good component to have in a standalone file. So let's just call this new bookmark form.js. What I'm going to do is cut the component. I'm not going to save the file yet, but paste it over here. And ESLint can be a good help when you're coming to the imports and figuring out what imports are needed. So I've just copied over all the imports. My ESLint editor integration is running to tell me what I need. I'm going to do export default function because I want new bookmark form to be exported from this file. Now I can see that linking is not needed, use effect is not needed, but use state is. Only platform is needed from React Native, only text input is needed from React Native paper, and these other imports are not needed. So ESLint is satisfied. It looks like this is good. I'm going to save this file, which shouldn't cause any changes. Although it does go ahead and trigger my test to rerun. But now what I'm going to do, oh, and I can see in this file that text input is already removed. So now I'm going to import new bookmark form from, and this is an easy relative import because it's in the same folder. I do have this components folder, which is for shared components that are on different screens. But if I have something like the new bookmark form that's unique to this one screen, I'm going to nest it under the folder to keep it all together. So now I have the new bookmark form here, and it's available as an import. And I think, oh, let's see what this failure is. Looks like it actually, something strange about the way Sublime was working actually saved changes to all my files, so that's interesting. But now I'm going to save this change that's importing new bookmark form, and we'll see if it succeeds. All my warnings to scare me as usual. Warnings shouldn't be read. But all my tests are passing. So this extraction has succeeded. And I can say extract new bookmark form to file. So that's one less component in this file. So let's see what's next. Unread bookmark list. Now we could extract that, but actually it has something else I'd like to extract, unread bookmark row, and I'd like to have that in a separate file as well. So I'm going to extract unread bookmark row first, because if we pull out the list, we need to pull the row with it. Well, you know, yeah, that would be a lot to move at once. So let me make the smaller change and remove unread bookmark row. Okay, unread bookmark row. I'm going to cut this. I'm going to copy it this time so that that file doesn't fail. Export default function, unread bookmark row. So let ESLint tell, well, let's get all our imports over. And something we should see is that the import list gets smaller as we go. So this new bookmark form only has 3 imports. And that explicit imports like that are a way to help us to see our dependencies. And although this parent file has a lot of dependencies, each of these child files should have fewer of them, so that helps us to see how we're isolating concerns. Actually, one other thing, before I change those imports, I can see down under unread bookmark row, the open bookmark function is also, I'm getting confused. Did I do this on the last stream? Am I going insane? This is feeling very familiar. Implement the finish version extracting files. Yeah, extracting components. No, I must just be repeating what I did on my own. So open bookmark, I must have been talking to myself. I feel like I was talking to others, but I guess I was talking to myself. So let me get this out of the way. Open bookmark is a function where when we click one of these list items, the bookmark opens. So it opens up in a browser. And so that's needed. I thought about, when I was thinking about this, if I want to have that passed in, but I think having that dependency in this file, it seems fine to me. So I'm going to move open bookmark in. I'm going to take advantage to put it underneath. A lot of times I like the default export to be the first export in a file, so you can see it easily if there are secondary things. Now let's remove the imports that aren't needed. Linking is needed. Use effect and use state are not. No flat list. List and menu are needed, but none of these others are needed. So we can save this file. Our tests are probably going to aggressively go ahead and run. Now let's go ahead and delete it out of here. We're going to import unread bookmark row. So much work I put myself through by not using Visual Studio Code. It's okay. So now with that import, I don't need linking. I no longer need platform or pressable, and I no longer need list or menu. So the fact that React Native Paper import is going away in this file is a good sign, because it means that we're operating at a higher level of abstraction. We don't have any direct immediate components in this file, just these higher level components. Now, excluding flat list, but that'll go away in a minute as well. All right, so let's save this change. Let our test run, make sure it's good. And it worked. So let's look at this. Extract unread bookmark row into child component. Something else that occurs to me is that because this is in the same, well, these are all absolute imports, but because this is in the same, these files are in the same folder, if there were any relative imports like this, excuse me, the path wouldn't change. So that's sort of a nice low effort way to move things around. Something else you may be thinking is, we've just added this unread bookmark row import into the index file, but now for our next step, it's going to go away because we're going to remove unread bookmark list out to a separate module, and unread bookmark row is going to go with it. So why bother add it in here if I'm going to immediately remove it? And the answer is small steps. So I found just a broad general principle in software development that moving in small steps pays off over time. And that's also something that's mentioned in Martin Fowler's refactoring book. And he would advocate the kind of refactoring we're doing here, I would think. So I don't mind adding this unread bookmark row import here in this commit, knowing I'm going to remove it in the next commit, because it's giving me a commit where all my tests are passing, where I'm confident in things. And if you do a bunch of component moves around all at once, you may get mysterious errors, especially in React Native when you can end up with mysterious errors. And so having stable points where the tester verified everything's still good, I really like that as I go, so I don't end up with half an hour of work that I need to throw out. That would be a very embarrassing live stream, and it happens. But so small steps are definitely preferable to me. And this is some of the value of these automated tests. So I haven't been manually testing as we've gone through and made all these changes. I probably will manually test it some at the end to make sure. But having these tests run encourages us to make these changes. Whereas if we didn't have the test, we might say, you know what, unread screen file is fine. It's kind of long, but I don't feel like doing all the retesting necessary to change it. So I end up leaving code that's not ideal. When you have thorough test coverage, you can refactor your code. You can put it in the ideal form to make it as easy as possible to work with. So let's continue that refactor by making another file for unread bookmark list. Let's again copy and paste it out. Copy and paste the imports. We'll ignore those scary warnings. Export default function. All right, so we don't need use effect. We do need flat list. We don't need center column. We have the error and no records messages. Makes sense. We don't have the screen background, use bookmarks, or new bookmark form. And we are importing the unread bookmark row. So we save. That red, I think, is just line wrapping. So that'll be updated. Great. All right, so now in here, we're going to import unread bookmark list from unread bookmark list. We're going to delete unread bookmark list out of this file. And now we're going to see what ESLint tells us. We don't need flat list. And so now both React Native and React Native paper imports are gone. So we are only using high-level visual components in this file. Error message and no records message go away. Unread bookmark row. I don't know what that ESLint warning is. It's defined but never used. Oh, right. Unread bookmark row is not used because it's now an unread bookmark list, so it's going away. All right, so now we save this file. Now we just have the unread screen. It's the only component. It's still not the tiniest in the world because it has this state management where we're loading bookmarks from the server and we're adding, marking read, and deleting, which again could be a custom hook if we wanted to, but I don't feel the need too much at this point. All of our tests are passing, so this extraction as well has worked. Extract unread bookmark list into file. Now, as I think about unread bookmark list and unread bookmark row, I do believe there are things in here, because there is also a read bookmark list and read bookmark row that we need. There's going to be a read screen. So we will need to reuse those, but rather than thinking in advance about what that reuse is going to look like, I'm going to wait until I have the screen to find the need. And then because I have this good test coverage, I can make changes to these files. I can pull out the things that are shared from the things that are unique to the unread screen. And rather than trying to think hard in advance to make sure I know what it is, I'm going to let my feature requirements drive me there. So I can make this extraction for now, and I can extract to shared components later in the future. So let's take a look at our files. Unread screen has just 6 rows of imports, and it's 78 lines long. New bookmark form has just 3 rows of imports, and it's 39 lines long. Unread bookmark list has 5 rows of imports and it's 56 lines long, and unread bookmark row has 3 rows of imports and it's 44 lines long. So these are all a lot more focused. And let's see what these components are doing. So the responsibility of unread screen is mainly the state management at the top level, although it's also assembling the children that are being nested and some kind of layout things there. But it's sort of operating at a higher level of abstraction where it just says, I have a bookmark form and a bookmark list. But look at those comments for the details of what happens there. New bookmark form, as is often the case for React form components, is managing its own state. But other than that, it is just calling out to a function passed in to handle the creating the state management at that level. Unread bookmark list, we put the menu management at this level, so the state for the menu lives there. And we have some functions that pass through to passed in functions, but also handle local stuff. We have a little helper function here that shows a header sometimes, and then we just render out the flat list and the detailed row. And then the detailed row is actually a stateless component. I've started preferring function keyword for all my top level components, but with that, it could be an arrow function because all we're doing inside it is returning JSX to have these have the row implemented. So with all this refactoring, I'm going to go ahead and push this up to a PR. Start out a PR over here. Let's get GitHub Actions running on this. And can I get this tab into here? Yeah, there we go. So in the meantime, while that's running, I felt like there was something that I was going to do. We've reviewed all these components. I've argued so much that they're in good shape. My tests are passing. Oh yeah, I was going to manually test. So yeah, I'm going to reload to make sure my app is still running. Let me just pull up the web version of the app as well. Oh, I think I restarted things, so let me restart the web version from here. I saw an error in here talking about no such file or directory, unread screen JS. So interestingly, what I've found is actually that React Native CLI and Expo and Create React app as well, I found this, they don't like it when you rename a file from unread screen JS to unread screen index.js. It kind of breaks their caching. And so it's interesting because it supports that approach so well, but it just doesn't support you refactoring to it. So you have to generally stop your server and restart your server when you do a refactoring like that. So now I'm loading up my web and my iOS app. Just to manually test them. Well, and this may require just a full quit and reload. Or maybe I broke something. Oh no, there it goes. It is always possible that I broke something. I should not always assume that everything's fine. All right, so the app has come up on web and on phone just fine. Let's try things out. Nike.com. We add it, it gets added. We can mark red, we can delete, and then if I reload over here, are those links going to go away? Yep, so that's there. We mark red, delete, and add. Coding it wrong, silly notes, and reload over here, and it loads in just fine. So I think our manual testing is confirmed that it's going well. Meanwhile, GitHub Actions is finished. Those React Native testing library tests have passed, and we can merge this down. Cool. So I wanted to show that refactoring just to see the power and flexibility we get from these comprehensive tests. All right, let's see what's next. Now we want to implement refreshing the list of links. Yes, so what I want to do is I have this list of links, but so say I'm in one client here and I delete a link. And I want that Google to go away. So I don't have a way to reload it here. It's a very common pattern on mobile to pull to refresh, but it's not working, and I'd like to get it working. Now, thankfully, Flatlist does have that built in, but there is a trickiness we're going to run into when it comes to the web, and so that's why I wanted to step through this together as an example of implementing different behavior for web and for mobile. Now, in my other app, Surely, the previous app that I built with Expo for web, I ended up stumbling across this gradually, and so I didn't build a good abstraction for this. So this time what I want to do is build a good abstraction from the start. So you'll just need to trust me that this abstraction is needed, and as we go through it, you'll see the value of it, I think. Or you can decide that I'm coding it wrong. So what it is let's check out the documentation. So we do have for my flat list, there is a prop on refresh. If provided, a standard refresh control will be added for pull to refresh functionality. Make sure to also set the refreshing prop correctly. Refreshing, set this to true while waiting for new data from a refresh. So these props are going to allow us to implement pull to refresh. So let's give that a try first. We are going to build it through my abstraction that I've suggested, but let's just implement it one step at a time. So this is going to be a shared component because I know I'm going to need it. Make a new file. I'm going to call it refreshable flat list, which is maybe a bit surprising name because flat list does have refreshing built in. But again, trust me and you'll see where this goes. I do want a branch for this though, so refreshing. So let's start refreshing. All right, so we're gonna say export default function refreshable flat list. And again, I am using my cheater monitor over here for hints because I worked through this in advance, especially because this was brand new abstraction. I wanted to kind of get it right. We are gonna need port flat list. So we need flat list from React Native. And really this is just a lightweight wrapper around return flat list. And one of the things we want to do is to just be able to pass any props we want through to the flat list. So at this point, this is just a pass through that isn't adding anything. Is that right? No, that's not the right syntax. I want a curly around this, I think. I've done React, I've done Vue, I've done Ember. I confuse myself in the syntax. Fimian knows what I'm talking about. The different ways, the different alternatives, all these good options. Okay, so I have a flat list here. Let's try first, thinking about it in terms of small steps, let's just try to make sure I can sub in this refreshable flat list and my other components continue to work. So I'm gonna import, I'm gonna copy this row. Refreshable flat list. And now I'm going to get rid of flat list and we're just going to use refreshable flat list here. And all of our other props we're going to leave just as is. So let's see if the tests pass. And in the meantime, let's see if the app works. I always like to do a manual refresh just to make sure. I see a list and it looks like it works. So the pass through seems to be working. So I'm going to make a commit for this. Add pass through. Refreshable flat list component. All right, so now that we have that doing nothing, what do we want to do? The first thing I'd like to do is the indicator state. So we talked about that refreshing flag. What I found through working on this is that I would really like this refreshable flat list to have that flag and that calculation internally to it. And the reason why is you don't need this for all cases, but for this case, we will need the state here because of some overriding that I'm going to be doing. How do I do this? Checking that cheater monitor. I'm going to start with this the simplest way possible. I'm going to say is refreshing. I'll just call it refreshing. Bubbly water is refreshing too. Not a product placement. I just wanted to make a dumb joke. All right, is refreshing. Use state false. By default, it's not refreshing. And so now for this flat list, we're going to override these props. Yeah, I'm going to override it here with refreshing equals refreshing. Right? Yeah. Refresh from list. Yeah, okay. Okay. And so now I'm going to implement on refresh here to allow the refreshing, and I'm going to say refresh from list. So I want to implement this here. One of the things that I'm going to do with that is I'm going to take in an on refresh prop, and I'm going to call it. So at this point, it's just a pass through again. But I want to do a little bit more because what I want to do is I want to say set refreshing true. I want to make this actually an async function, and I want to await on refresh, and then I want to set refreshing false. So basically at this point, we have a promise that runs in here for on refresh, but I don't need any other state passed in. I basically, I'm going to say that I'm refreshing until that promise resolves, and when it does, I'm going to set refreshing false. So this should actually give us, well, I gotta pass an on refresh into it, but once I do, this should actually give us refreshing behavior. I can't get refreshing, terrible refreshing puns out of my mind. So, okay, so refreshable flat list here. I want to say on refresh. So what am I going to do in here to refresh it? Do I need to pass that in? Let me see what I did on the cheater monitor. Yeah, I did pass that in. Okay, so we'll just pass it through on refresh. because we want this to come from this screen, because the unread screen is what does the data management. On refresh equals refresh. So we want to implement a refresh. Why are those consts? Those should have been function keyword functions. Oh well. I'll do this to be consistent. Refresh is there, and I know it's going to be async. So I got my refresh. What am I going to do to refresh? Okay. So actually what I'm going to do to refresh is actually this bookmark client. It's the same thing that's in there. So I want to extract this out and make sure things still stay working before I do anything else there. And I think to do that, I actually want to not have all these changes happening at once. Yeah, something has failed. Yeah, so something has failed. So actually, now that I've found a refactoring I want to do before I add this change, I'm going to take all these changes and I'm actually just going to stash them. And so then I'm going to do this prior change. And I'll just keep these tests over here running to make sure they pass so that we're good to go. Again, I'm going to be warned and I'm going to be scared about the warning, but all my tests are passing. So the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to extract out load from server. This is effectively load from server. So let's make this, and I think it needs to be a callback. And you'll see, I'll be able to say something about why it's a callback in just a second, but I can answer that better when I have an example in front of me. So use callback. We're going to copy all of this out. And the dependency of the callback, I'm just going to let ESLint tell me. And then down here in the use effect, we're just going to say load from server. So let's fix the syntax error, and then ESLint is going to tell us what to do. So there's some formatting things, but down here it says missing dependency bookmark client. It makes sense. It says that's the only dependency, and then here the dependency is load from server. So this is why we need a callback here. So load from server is a dependency of the use effect. But if we defined a new function every time we came through the component, that would trigger a rerun of the effect. So we need to say use callback to say we only need to recreate load from server when bookmark client changes, which is actually not going to change. So this should prevent an infinite loop of stuff. And when I save this, I believe that this extraction, I believe the tests are still going to pass because. And this is actually a named refactoring. I don't often think about the names of these official refactorings from Martin Fowler's refactoring book, but this is one. And let me just make sure the tests pass. They do. Extract function. So this is actually also known as extract method. This is a formal refactoring that you can do, and that's recommended to have ideas of how you can rearrange your code to improve the layout of it. So instead of changing a bunch of things at once, I just wanted to make this behavior preserving change and commit that. And I'm going to say extract load from server function. Kent Beck had a tweet years ago where he said, first make the change easy, then make the easy change. So in other words, when you have a change you need to make, if it's going to be hard to make that change, first rearrange the code so that the change will be easy, then make it. So what we're doing is we're rearranging the code so we have this nice reusable load from server callback, and then we'll use that to implement the refreshing. We've separated out the refactoring from the new behavior implementation. And actually, I'd like to do another refactoring here. I do tend to use promise chaining in use effects because the use effect function can't be an async function because of React's APIs. Some people think I'm weird. Some of my coworkers are like, Josh, I thought you knew how to write JavaScript. Everybody writes async await now. You're ridiculous. So, okay. And I do like async await for a lot of things, although it got me in trouble with something on an earlier stream that we found out. But that was my fault. I would like to rewrite load from server to be an async function because I think that would be more readable than this chain and just more familiar. So let's do it. And especially because I got my cheater monitor, I can be confident in this. But also we have the tests. If I mess it up, the tests are going to fail. So let's do it. Async function. And we're going to say, we're going to need a try because there's going to be because there's an error here. Catch E. Bookmark client where, filter red false, and this is going to go to bookmark response. Await bookmark client where, And then we're going to say set bookmarks with bookmark response data. And then if there's an error, we're going to set error message, an error occurred while loading links. And I think that's good for now. I think this is a rewriting of that function to be asynchronous. And so let's save and see if the tests support it. This would be a JavaScript specific refactoring. It's not in that general catalog, and that catalog is not meant to be exhaustive. But replace promise chain with async await syntax. That's a JavaScript refactoring, and now we've done it. So let's do it. Refactor load from server from promise chain to async await. And our tests have supported that. I probably wouldn't have bothered if I didn't have the test coverage, but because I had the test coverage, as I've been saying and harping on the whole time, I was confident making this change. All right. Interesting. That is not as... Oh, you know what? I was wondering why I was getting this text wrapping, because it seemed like it cluttered it up. In my other code, I just called it response, and from the context, we can see what the response is. So I think this is... Oh, ESLint didn't, or Prettier didn't force me to rewrite it, but I think it'll take this as one line now, which I think is going to make it more readable to see just the few things that we're doing there. And it does, so we can amend that to our previous commit. All right, so now we have this load from server function. Now we're ready to pop the stash that we had to resume our previous work of setting up that refreshing state. Oh, we do have a conflict here. That's okay. Yep, these go together. It's just a small change. And so how do we want to implement refresh? Well, rather than thinking, let me check my cheater monitor. Maybe these async functions, I can come back to function keywords a little later. But for my refresh function, yeah, there's something else we're going to add in there. You know, for now, let's just do load from server. For now, all we need to do is load from server, so let's just do that in line. So unread bookmark list, on refresh, load from server. So initially when we start this component, we're going to get those bookmarks from the server and store them in the state and error out if there's a problem. And then when we refresh, we're going to do the same things. So we're just going to preserve that and reuse that. So let's review again what changes we've made in here. So in the refreshable flat list, we added this refreshing state in here, this refresh from list function that's going to update that state and then call on refresh from up above, from outside. Then we pass that up to unread bookmark list. Oh, unread bookmark list has a something we're going to need to fill in there. On refresh is on refresh. So basically the unread on refresh prop we pass into unread bookmark list gets passed down to refreshable flat list. Then, oh, well, that's a conflict. Did I save that? Yeah, let's review again. The refreshable flat list does that state management I described. Unread bookmark row, unread bookmark list passes unread on refresh on, and then the top level is just load from server. So there's not a lot of changes happening there at once. So our test should pass still, but this new functionality is not actually covered by tests, so we're going to need to manually try it to see. Now you see, now that the flat list has that refreshing and on refresh props, it knows to give me this little pull to refresh option, and when I pull it, I assert that it's loading from the server. To see that run a bit long, well, there's a few different things we can see that happening. Because we have a web app as well, I do always like to bounce back over. Oh, well, actually web is not going to help us here for a problem I'm going to show in just a minute. So instead, well, one thing I'm going to do is let's make sure it's actually catching the changes. So I'm going to mark this as red. So now when I reload this list, we should no longer have codingitwrong.com on the top. Pull and it disappears. So that should be working. But that is really fast. So let's just see this loading state run for a bit longer. We can do that by doing a set timeout, or set refreshing, and give it 5 seconds. So after on refresh, we're going to wait 5 seconds before we set refreshing to false. So now if I delete this, pull to refresh, it should stay on here for 5 seconds. 2, 3, 4, 5, done. Cool. Yeah, so that is not needed. So I think we are successfully refreshing from the list. Now I think I'm going to wait. I'm going to do the test at the end. TDD advocates will be upset with me, but that's okay. I mean, well, we're already writing the functionality before the test, so why not compromise further? But I want to help you all to see what it is we're adding to this refreshable flat list. So like add pull to refresh to unread list. So let's give this a try on the web. Pull. Okay, well, pulling is not working. No, I can't pull that way. Can I pull with my trackpad? Nope. What if this is shorter? Can I pull? No. With the bar, pull? No. No, pull to refresh is not working on the web. And that seems to be intentional because that's not a web browser paradigm. It also doesn't work on mobile web either because you're just scrolling the page. So we need a different approach to allow refreshing on the web because I want to do it. So this is a situation you can get into where you do see different behaviors between mobile and web. In my last experience, my last Expo web app, I would say that 99% of the code is the same across web and mobile. There was only a few tiny conditionals added in. But this is one example of a conditional that we need to add in. We need different behavior. I do want to use pull to refresh and have that be the only thing that shows up on mobile. But on web, I want something different. And what I ended up doing on my other project was adding in a button that shows at the top, just a refresh or reload button that shows at the top. So that's something else that refreshable flat list is going to allow us, is that it's going to provide a user interface that does work on web as well, not just on mobile. So let's add that in. So I'm going to import a button from React Native Paper. Where am I going to put that? I'm going to put it down here. Button. I want it outlined. That's the style for React Native Paper that I want. I'm going to say reload. Even though refresh is the functionality for flat list, and so that's the term I'm using internally to the code, reload makes more sense to me user-facing. Oh, we are going to need some style here. Style equals styles refresh button. And of course, I'm not coming up with this off the top of my head. I don't think that way. What I'm doing is looking at my cheater code here and finding the styles that came from the other app. And all we need here is just a bit of a margin, just 15 pixel margin around the refresh button. And then we want it on press. Refresh from button. And so that's actually why refresh from list was named that, was because we need refresh from button. And that is, for right now, the implementation is going to be the same. If I was writing this from scratch, I would have used the same refresh function, but because I'm looking at my other code, I know that something else is coming, but we have a refresh from button that happens there. So that button should show, well, now the button should show everywhere. So let's see if it works at least. We're here on the web, we have a reload button. We click it. We can't see what's happening, but now that we're on the web, we can easily see in the network panel what's happening. Click reload. We can see that bookmarks at least is being hit, but let's now try to delete a bookmark, reload, and that deletes. And in the same way, if we delete this one Nike bookmark, we should just see one over here. We click reload, and that works. Cool. So I'm going to add this in. Add reload button for refreshing on web. But now the next thing is, I don't want the reload button to show on mobile. It is common expectation to be able to pull to refresh, so I don't want that screen real estate being taken up. So how can I make it only show on web, not on mobile? Well, that's a pretty simple conditional. That is a platform conditional. And I wouldn't always do this, but because I know the future and I know where we're going, I'm going to say, oop, don't look at that, cheated there. Show reload button. I'm just to define a variable in line here and say, show reload button if the OS we're on is web, which is not actually an OS, but is kind of an OS, but that's how that platform is exposed. It's not, the platform we're on is not iOS or Android, it is web. And so what I'm going to say is we only show the reload button if show reload button is true. And so now this conditional should now mean the reload button doesn't show for us on the web, but on mobile, but it does show for us on the web. All right. Hide reload button on mobile. All right, so that's an improvement. So the next thing is different reload indicator for web. So when I click reload, let me add that delay, that 5-second delay in again, and in the refresh from button. Set timeout. So there should be a 5-second delay after this. And I'm just to show you a change so we're sure we're happening, I'm going to delete Nike. Now I'm going to click reload. Now notice we don't get this nice loading indicator that we were getting on the web. The nice thing that pops up there until the loading is done. And I'm going to put this set timeout back on mobile so we can see that. On mobile, while a load is happening, we get this nice pull to refresh loading indicator that disappears when we're done. And so I actually want something like that to show up on the web as well. And I saw something in the docs about some way to override the default refresh indicator to like make them the same or something. So that's something that I could look into, but I'm just going to follow my existing pattern. And I'm not too worried about it showing up identically in both cases, or the fact that this indicator probably doesn't match material design. I'm not worried about that kind of stuff. But what I want to do is to get a loading indicator that shows on the web, and only shows on the web. So what we can do, do I have a loading indicator yet? Okay. So I set up a reusable application loading indicator component. This is coming over from my previous project. It's using activity indicator from React Native paper, and it just has a margin around it. It's size large, it has an accessibility label, it has a margin. But other than that, so the idea is this is just a loading indicator we can drop into any file that we're in throughout the application. The standard loading indicator. What is this? Please don't not expect that token. Okay, we're good. All right, we've got our loading indicator. So we're going to pull that into refreshable flat list. Loading indicator. So I want the flat list's loading indicator to show in its case, basically on mobile we can pull, and then I want the flat list loading indicator to show because the flat list is what we pulled. On web we use the button, and I want the other loading indicator to show. And so as I thought about this is one of the things that was really messy in my previous code because this was evolving and I wasn't really sure what the best way was to do it. But really what I found here is that we actually have a different kind of state other than a Boolean. It's no longer a refreshing Boolean. What it is it's and endure this internal loading indicator name. You'll see why it's called that in a bit. But what is the loading indicator we should use? And by default, it's null or no loading indicator. And I want to have two types of loading indicator, and I'm going to set up contents for that. But the loading indicator is there's a flat list loading indicator and there's a standalone loading indicator. Spoilers, don't read the spoilers. And so the idea is that internal loading indicator is one of these values or it's null. And so now we're going to be able to change the values in here. And when we refresh from list, instead of saying refreshing true, we say set the internal loading indicator to the flat list one. And then afterwards we set it to null. And for refresh from button, this is now the difference. Refresh from button is going to set the standalone loading indicator and then afterwards be done. So these are now different. Now what do we do with the loading indicator check? Yeah, and let's, it's going to be confusing. Please endure with me. Please believe that this is free content you're getting, and that's why it's not the most prepared in the world. I'm going to give this variable another name called loading indicator to show, and again, you'll see why later. But once we have this loading indicator to show, what we say is, okay, only if the loading indicator to show is the standalone one should we show this loading indicator, and tell the flat list it's refreshing only if the loading indicator to show is the flat list one. So at any point in time, only one or the other or neither of these will be shown because we have this single state here that's taking one of these states. So now I think we are going to see a loading indicator on the web. So let's save this and see. We're on the web. Let me add in that delay again. If only Ruby on Rails was slower on my API, then I'd be better off. But it's just too fast. It's just so fast. the dynamic interpreted language. Okay, so now what I expect is going to happen is when I click on reload, I'm going to see a spinning red loading indicator here on web. And I do. So it's loading. And then after 5 seconds, it should go away. And on here, I expect that when I pull, I'm going to see the standard pull to refresh loading indicator. And I do. After 5 seconds, it goes away. Great. So our separating out of these two different types of loading indicators has allowed us to cover that other case. I'll do a separate commit to add loading indicator component. Show separate loading indicator for web. All right, we've got a separate loading indicator there. I'm going to change the order of two little subpoints I'm doing here. So the other thing is, I have, you might not be able to see this too easily on the live stream, but on the recording later, you might be able to pause and see it. I have a situation in the list where if there's no records, I get a message that says no unread links. And actually, I could just pull that out to show it to you. So when there's no records, you're going to see no unread links here. Now, while the page is loading, right at the start, by default, in the screen, we start out with empty array of bookmarks. We start out with no bookmarks. You know what, I just realized a different way I can handle this problem. Okay, but let me show the problem first before I do anything else. When I reload the app, I expect we're going to see no unread links up here before the links load in. Yep, and if you saw it, no unread links showed up for about half a second. I'm going to reload it again. Look right there, no unread links. So that's not a good behavior because it feels like the app is saying one thing and then saying another thing. Really what's going on is we have a loading state there, and we want to show a loading indicator when the app is first loading up as well. So I have a different way to do this than I was expecting. Yeah, so let's just kind of start from here. What I want to indicate, I want some way for the app to know that we haven't loaded the bookmarks yet, and then I want some way to display the same loading indicator in that scenario. So let's do that one step at a time. In the unread screen, we're starting out with an empty array for the bookmark state. And that can be helpful so that you always have an array, so you know you can always work with that. But I think, an easy way to indicate whether the bookmarks have been loaded is to say null. So that empty array means I have loaded an empty array of bookmarks from the server, and null means I have not yet loaded any bookmarks from the server. Any future reloads, we put new arrays in there, so null means it's never been loaded in the first place. So what do we do if bookmarks are null? Well, bookmarks are just passed down into unread bookmark list, and that's probably fine. Now in unread bookmark list, I think we're going to have errors here. Because list header is going to check bookmarks length. So I'm going to see that blow up. Right? I think our test blew up. Null is not an object evaluating bookmarks length. So I think the right thing here is just to skip over that and not show no records message in that case. And so I think actually now we're showing the null header here. Yeah. So actually that's another commit we can put in, and let's see if the tests are passing. Nope. Unread screen adding a link allows adding a link to the list. Why would the new bookmark not show in that scenario? Let me stash this. Oh, you know what? It might be the refreshable flat list that's erroring out as well. But it doesn't look like it. Yeah, so that's fine. It could be that the test is erroring out. Let's investigate the test, because I'd like to make this change as one small commit. One failed. Allows adding a link to the list. So if we narrow it down to just this test, we might be able to see some kind of warning that's happening. Let's try that. Unable to find an element with text new bookmark. Interesting. I wonder if that's an artifact of test data we've put in. So that could actually be good. Well, JSON API response bookmark. $123. So this is after. Oh, check it out. Here's what's going on. Well, I don't know for sure, but I know this is the test to add a bookmark to the list. And what I'm finding is that adding it, it doesn't get added in. I wonder if that's because the bookmark is still null at that point. Let me see if I can add a bookmark to the list. It does. So this is some sort of failure with this test. This is already an improvement in the state of the code, so I want to get this test passing so that we can keep moving. This is not a roadblock. This is a valuable thing because I want to get this test coverage. So, spec posts have been called with bookmarks. Make sure that it shows. Why would it not show? One thing I could do is in unread bookmark list. Well, actually in here, we could log out the bookmarks to see every time it re-renders, we should get a new set of the bookmarks outputted. This could give us some insight into what's going on. Bookmarks null, bookmark ID 1. There could be a timing issue here where it's happening too fast. I wonder if, so when I add bookmark, we set bookmarks here, expanding the previous bookmarks. Let me see if I, using the function form of this, old bookmarks, that could prevent a timing issue, and it could help in a real app as well. So let's see if this fixes it. It does. Okay, so I'm going to actually separate this out as well. I'm going to make this a separate commit. Because this is a good change to make regardless. Use arrow form of the use state setter to prevent a timing issue. So basically this is a matter of if the component doesn't get to re-render its in time to get a new function here to have the previous bookmarks cached in, this is still gonna get the bookmarks at exactly that point in time and add to them. And that's about all I can say at this level of detail right now. So with that, let's remove that only. And let's remember the previous thing we were doing. I do like to do small commits like that, even as I'm working on one thing and I find I need to fix something else. Let's commit that separately so they're understandable and movable there. So let's see what these changes do entail now. So in the bookmark list, we're checking if bookmarks exist and the length is 0, show no unread links. And we're starting with bookmarks of null. So this should be enough to fix do not show no unread bookmarks when initially loading. So we've removed that message, but we don't now have a clear indication on the screen of what's happening. And if it took a few seconds, it would be confusing. And so what I'd like to do instead is to be able to tell refreshable flat list, hey, when I'm initially loading, please show it. And that is a bit of a challenge because refreshable flat list is tracking its own reloading state. So how do we control that from outside as well? So I tried a few things, and what I ended up finding as the simplest is to pass in a prop. And so, and we're going to use that other variable for that. So rather than stumbling around trying to describe it in general, let's just go ahead and go. So we're in unread bookmark list. We have our bookmarks. We have our refreshable flat list. We have on refresh. And so yeah, let me see what I called this over here. So what I'm thinking is here is to have a show loading indicator prop. And what this is basically saying, if this is true, we say, hey, override your internal state. Whatever you think is happening, I'm telling you, please show the loading indicator. So it allows us to also control it from the outside. And we're going to show the loading indicator if bookmarks equals null. Is that the right way to check for null? I don't trust it. So let's say JavaScript, how to check for null. Always got to check it. That's not convincing. Let's try Stack Overflow. So it's April Fool's Day as we're recording this, and this is Stack Overflow's April Fool's joke, visual filters. And just so happens, I don't know if other people got other random ones, but I just got the most terrible one assigned to me. Got a Mario one. Got a console one. Let's do the Lisa Frank one. Okay, how can I check for null values in JavaScript? Oh, come on, man. Check for null specifically, you would use variable equals null. It will only pass for null. Cool. Okay, well, that's convincing enough. This blaring yellow website has convinced me that that's true. So let's check it. So refreshable flat list, please show the loading indicator if bookmarks is null, not is an empty list. So let's go to the refreshable flat list. We're going to now take in that prop, show loading indicator. And so now here's what I wanted to do, is to change loading indicator to show. This is the difference between internal loading indicator and loading indicator to show. We say, if show loading indicator is true, then show the standalone indicator, because that's the one we want. That'll work on web and on mobile as well. That's fine. Otherwise, show the internal loading indicator. So really, we're not having this prop passed in adjust the state in the internal component. We're just saying, hey, here's where we're tracking the fact that it's refreshing. Oh, and I just thought of a better name for that. So let's rename this, because I think that'll help. Let me stash this. No, but it's internal loading indicator. No, I don't have a better name for it. What we're saying is internally we're saying the loading indicator we should indicate as flat list or standalone. And if that's, but there's another case that could override it. So if externally, if the parent is telling me, yes, show the loading indicator regardless, we go for it. Otherwise, we depend on the internal state to see whether we should show that loading indicator or not. And so instead of updating the state based on a value prop coming in with a use effect, which gets messy real quick, instead we do it this way. And so I think this is going to work for us. I think we're going to see that loading indicator initially. Whoa, that screen, man. Okay. Yeah, let's see if this is fast enough. When I reload the page, I saw it was too fast, so I need to change this load from server here. What's going to be the way to make that work? Oh yeah, we can delay this. Set timeout. Set bookmarks after 5 seconds. So now we should see the indicator for 5 seconds. The page loads. We see the indicator for 5 seconds. Nothing appears because the bookmarks haven't been set. But now they're set and in place. And now if I click reload, the bookmarks should not hide. They should still be there because I'm just reloading them, but I want them to be available in the meantime. And that one goes very fast, but you can see it popping down and popping back. Now on mobile, when I reload, I get first that material design loading indicator for 5 seconds. 5 seconds is just for testing. They come in, and then after that, when I pull, I get the pull the refresh loading indicator. Again, for my personal standards, the fact that that's 2 loading indicators is fine. I don't feel like implementing that or coding that any differently. And what was I going to say? Incidentally, the whole arrangement of this code of like what to reload and what to hide under different conditions versus what to always show, like the list, I stumbled through that in Shirley. I didn't think through those user experience things in advance. I just worked through until I was like, oh, I kind of wish the list didn't keep disappearing here. I kind of wish it stayed in place until something was in place. So these things I kind of just evolved over time. Okay, so let's remove this set timeout and let's commit this change. And the change is, yeah. Show initial loading indicator when loading bookmarks. So that's nice. So we're in really good shape in terms of the reloading. I can pull the refresh. I can click to refresh. So there's one more thing that I would not have thought of off the top of my head here, but because I was looking at my old application code, I did think about. So check this out. So I'm here, and I scroll down to the bottom. Notice the reload button does show up in the screen. It doesn't show up loaded in the list, and I decided that I like that. But when I reload this, it stays scrolled to the bottom. So for example, so I've got Nike at the top here. If I add something new in here, like React Native, something new and cool, and it pops to the top. When I reload over here, I don't immediately see that there's something at the top. I'd really like to go to the top. And, you know, as a result of pull to refresh, by pulling, you're necessarily going to go to the top regardless if you're scrolled down below there. But I would like reload to pop us up to the top as well. And I certainly don't remember to do that, how to do that off the top of my head, so I'm going to look over here and see how I did it over here. Okay. I remember the general thing, but not off the top. So I'm going to show you the API first in the docs so you can see what we're going for. So in the React Native docs, are we on flat list? Yeah, we're on flat list. And there is a method. There's a few scroll methods, but one of them is scroll to index. So you can scroll to the index to index 0, for example. And there's a position as well you can go to. Now, it's not totally clear from the example here, like, okay, that's a method. This is a component. How do I call a method on a component? This isn't imperative code. What's going on? But if you've, I've probably looked at the Stack Overflow or something, but the way you get access to a reference for the component to be able to call a method on it is use ref. So let's use ref. We're in unread screen. We've got use ref. And so what we're saying is, let's put it here, const list ref. And so this is a reference that we're going to be able to let a component populate itself into so we can get access to it to call stuff on it. And once we have it, what we're going to do is go down to, what we're going to do is create a refresh method here, a function here, const refresh. And remember, down here previously on refresh we called load from server. What we're going to do is await load from server. And then if it succeeds, what we're going to do is list ref. And only if, there's a conditional as well. If the oh boy, there's a lot going on here. Trust me and believe me when I say this is valuable. So if you called, this is the basic thing we want to do, listref.current.scroll to index 0. Scroll me to the top. That can be a problem if there are no elements in the flat list. So there is no index 0. There's no item at index 0 because the length is 0. So we want to check, we want to get the reloaded bookmarks and check if the length is greater than 0, scroll there. Because if the length is 0, it's no big deal. We don't need to do any scrolling because there's nothing there. So to get those reloaded bookmarks, we need to return them from load from server. Return, how does this work? Loaded bookmarks equals response data. Loaded bookmarks is there, and return loaded bookmarks. So those will get returned out of there. Now we have them, and they need to get returned because we can't and don't want to wait for a re-render. We just needed the return value to come back from this to allow us to scroll. So now we're saying refresh, on refresh, refresh, so add that functionality as well. So this, once list ref is there, this will work, but we need to get list ref set. And the way we do that is we need to pass it down so that it can be filled in by the flat list. So it gets passed into unread bookmarks list. Where's unread bookmark list? List ref gets passed to there. Refreshable flat list. And this it seemed like I had a problem when I tried to use this as a pass-through component, so I'm going to still call it list ref. And then in refreshable flat list, we're going to take in list ref, and we're going to say flat list ref equals list ref. So the ref on flat list and other native components, the ref prop basically lets you pass a ref into it. It'll get filled in with that component instance so that you can call methods on it. So we save. And now what I believe will happen is when we call reload, we should be bumped to the top of this list. And we are. We're scrolled. It's actually even animated to go up there. So that's great. Scroll to the top of list on web after reloading. So we've got a nice experience there. So our reloading is working great in both cases. And now what we want to do is to get some tests in place to cover this behavior. And I think with the patterns we have, these tests are going to not be too bad. Our tests are passing, and that's because we haven't broken any existing behavior by adding this in. But now we want to cover our current behavior. And when you are adding the test after the fact, you can think about like, okay, what am I inspecting to make sure it's happening? And then you can comment out some of the old code to make sure it goes away. So I'm going to just compare my cheater code here and see, refresh. Yeah, and actually I have a whole section for refreshing. Did I group this here or not? Yes, I did. Good. Okay, so after displaying links, I added in refreshing. And again, because I'm reading the cheater monitor, don't assume that I could do this off the top of my head. I think in some future screens, I'm going to do some more ad hoc so you can see the stumbling that results. Okay, so what I want to do, so it turns out that so we've got the different platform check and stuff like that. It turns out that in just React Native testing library tests, the platform OS is defined as iOS. So we're going to have the iOS functionality available. So let's do that test first. It refreshes the list when pulling down on mobile. And so I went, because I wasn't sure about this pull to refresh behavior, how to test it. So that's one of the reasons I worked on this, apart from the stream, is I wanted to make sure I could do that. So let's just copy and paste our other stuff. We're mocking out HTTP. We don't actually need any records returned here. That's fine. We are loading our record. I probably would be nice for me to pull out this token provider at some point, but we're loading our screen. I'm going to wait for no unread links to appear. And let's just run this by itself to make sure it's succeeding. Actually, this is going to be wait for findBy text, copying and pasting an older version of the code. So let's just make sure that this test at least runs so far. One of the things that I found is with these asynchronous test issues in React Native testing library, it can be good to build out your test one bit at a time. So this is succeeding so far. It's not warning us even or erroring out. So then I want to say, okay, then I want to refresh. And what I can do to refresh is send the refresh event. And the reason that works is because when you have a prop that's called onRefresh, that's considered an event, and an event named refresh will call that prop on here. There might be another way to get a flat list. When there's text for elements like this, I like to use that. But to get a list, using an test ID seemed to be the best way for me. So let me just pass that in. And in fact, I don't want to do that at this level. I want to do it at this level and say test ID equals unread bookmarks list. Yep. I'm going to want get by test ID from here. It's actually surprising that didn't. It was because I didn't save the changes to that file yet. That's why that didn't fail out. Okay, that worked. Well, what worked? Well, we got this act warning. The update to it was not wrapped in an act, etc., etc. Yeah, we'll try to find a way to fix that. So we're refreshing, but we need, by refreshing, it's just going to call http.get again, and we need to get some different value returned. So in this test, let's say initially no bookmarks are returned, but things change on the server here so that there will be a bookmark, so that now when we refresh it, we should get that bookmark back. And so then what we can do is we can say, await findBy text, and we're going to say bookmark attributes title. So first we should see no unread links, but then after this we should see the bookmarks show. Let's save it and make sure that it passes. We are getting our good old friend, the act warning. Wish I was better to be able to fix that, but our test is passing. Never trust a test when it's passing, especially a React or React Native test, because there's so much asynchrony going on. You never know what's messed up and what you're asserting. So what I want to do, as I've said in previous streams, is I want to break this application behavior to make sure that my test will fail if it's not properly refreshed. And the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to actually I could break it at any level, but I could break it here. I'll just say, okay, on refresh, nothing. We're just going to call an empty function. So I expect when I save this that in my test, we're going to get to the point where we're able to call refresh here, but then this text for the bookmark title is never going to show, and that's what it's going to fail on. So if that fails, I know that my test is testing what I want it to test. It was axiomatic, but it sounds like, but it's not. It failed. We say, unable to find an element with text, test bookmark. We never got the bookmark back. And then when we implement the onRefresh behavior to go up to there, now we should get the bookmark back. Let that test succeed. It passes with our warning that we're getting desensitized to at this point. So let's run our whole test suite together, and then we can add a commit to add this in. So many warnings, but a succeeding test suite. So we'll say test pull to refresh on mobile. Now we have refreshing by clicking a button on the web. Let me just show you here, console log os platform.os. Just to confirm what's happening here. Oh, that's not passed in. Oh well. Do I want to do it? Yeah, I want you to see it. We don't need it in this file. We can do it in the component itself. Okay, so let's do it this way. Let's assume we can get to the button to refresh by clicking the button, and then we'll see what fails and we'll see how to work around it. So this test is going to mostly be the same, but there's one difference is instead of calling refresh, we're going to click the refresh button. And so that's going to be pretty easy, actually. That we know how to click a button a lot easier. It's actually just fire event press, and we're going to call it get by text on reload. So we want to click the reload button, and we want it to do the same thing to make sure that the bookmarks are successfully loaded. So let's let this run. It fails. And it says unable to find an element with the text reload. So let's add some console debugging statements to see why. In refreshable flat list, we should have reload here. I think that will work with the find by text, but I think maybe the platform OS is not working. So let's just console log this out here. Console logging in React Native tests is a great way to get insight into what's going on, just because React has just got so much going on. Platform OS as iOS. So that's why the button's not being rendered. Our Jest or React Native testing library is telling our app, you are on iOS. And so our app dutifully says, cool, okay, I'm not showing that reload button, but we want it to show. So how can we do that? So one way to do that is to work in your test to mock out Platform OS so that we can control, in this case, return Platform OS equal to web. This one, return Platform OS equals to iOS. And that is an option. I found that a lot of the ways to mock out Platform OS were kind of messy and kind of risky. And so instead I decided on a different approach. And what it is not always something you want to do. I just decided on changing the application code to add a conditional. So I want to say, hey, when should I show the reload button? Show the reload button if you're on the web or if you're in a test. Because I don't actually need to test both cases. I don't feel at this point that I need to test, make sure the button doesn't show on mobile and make sure it does show on web. Just as long as both reload options are available, that's good enough for the kind of testing I want to do right now. And so I could say, if you're on the web or if you're in a test, show the button. So the button will always show in a test for it so that we can pull or we can click the button. And process env, node env is a variable that Jest sets to test when it's running. So this should work and succeed. So that's what I decided in this case. You can mock out Platform OS if you need it. It didn't seem most urgent, and the stability of this code seemed better to me rather than the instability of mocking it out. And it succeeded. So now let's break this case as well. Let's break the refresh button, the reload button, so that it's not calling refresh, and let's make sure the test fails so that it's catching and ensuring this behavior is working for us. It's protecting us against regressions here. And it says unable to find element with the text test bookmark. So again, we are at the point where again we are clicking on the button, but it's never pulling down the bookmark, and so never rendering it out. So if we add that functionality back in, we're now guarding and protecting the fact that the button and the pull both will successfully refresh. Again, lots of warnings, passing tests. And let's just make sure we didn't mess things up. On mobile, make sure the button's not showing, the button's not showing. On web, make sure the button's showing, the button's showing. So I say test refreshing with button. Now the other change we made, if we look back at our list here, a lot of commits on this. Loading indicator, show initial loading indicator. So that's something else that I would like to test. We want to check to make sure that initially the loading indicator shows. And we can check that as a part of our renders links for the backend test. And let me just check over here to that cheater test. Yeah, so how can we look for this? This is an icon. Well, I set accessibility label of loading on there, and that's going to help with screen readers. And so we can actually use that in our test as well. So what we can do is in this loading here, first we can check that loading shows up initially when we're first loading on the screen. Query by label text. And then after we get the title of the bookmark in so it finishes, expect that loading is null. So first, expect it not to be null, expect it to be present, and then expect it to be null after we finish loading. So we'll make sure this works, and then we'll break the code functionality again to make sure that it's protecting us properly. It's not a false positive. So our test is passing. All the tests are passing. Let's just focus on this one. I mean, the fact that we're not seeing loading here and we are seeing it there indicates that something's happening. It's less likely that it's just a false positive. But I really just really, for any React Native component test, I really just want to see it. I really just want to know for sure. So, yeah, we had this show loading indicator here that say force the loading indicator to show when bookmarks are null. So let's take that out. So the loading indicator is no longer showing in that situation. We should see this test failing, and we should not see the loading indicator in the first place. Our test failed, and it said expect it received null. So on this line, expect loading not to be null. It was null, so the loading was not showing up anymore at the start. So by having this in, this confirms that the loading indicator is showing up at the start. I want to see those tests passing locally. You can set up hooks that will run your unit test as you're committing, but I have not seen that very commonly in JavaScript because you're often going to have so many tests. Maybe if there was a way to narrow down just the test for the file you were changing, but I tend to just run these on CI. So we'll say test initial loading indicator. I think we're good. We've got our refresh functionality working. We have about 30 minutes left. As is usually the case, we're not going to get to do all of the next feature that I anticipated. So this is not our last session. We are going to have probably one more session as a part of this series proper. So we'll say more about that. So here are our tests, our PR is running, our CI is running the test. So let's talk about what's next while that's running. I wanted to also, if we have time, Josh, we don't have time for this, let alone anything else. So what I want to do next, we're in the state where we can add, we can mark as read, we can delete links, and that's a lot of my main functionality for this main page. But the next thing I want to do, and the last thing I want to do as part of this stream proper is, I want the ability to edit this link so we can make changes to the fields, even some of the other fields. That's going to be useful to me. And one of the other things that's going to be nice about it is it's going to use the React Navigation's Stack Navigator to push us in to a nested screen and have a backlink to allow us to go back to the previous screen. That's helpful for just using React Navigation and getting to see it. We saw that early on in my experimentation when we were first just setting up the app skeleton before we added any app functionality. The other thing that's going to be nice is taking this screen testing approach that I'm advocating for, where each of your screens with React Navigation is tested together and you're not testing through React Navigation with its native dependencies. One of the things about that kind of screen testing is when you have code that is navigating you between screens, you have to know how to test it. And so we're going to get to demonstrate how to do that. So I think what we'll do today is just test from this screen, going from this screen to a placeholder screen for the details. And then next time we're going to actually implement that screen. Bao Warrior says, hello from Singapore. Hello, thanks for saying hey, Bao Warrior. Really glad you're here. I hope you're enjoying what you're seeing, or maybe you just popped in. We are building this application, if you're not aware, called Firehose. It's a link saving and viewing application. This is a pre-existing app that I have, but we're rebuilding the front end in Expo for web using React Native so that the same code base runs as a native mobile iOS and Android app and runs on the web as well. So glad you're here. Go and check out the previous recordings if you like. If you go to that link right, where is it? I gotta get my real-time preview. If you go to that link right there, you'll get more information on the series as well as recordings for all our past sessions. And yeah, jump in here or in comments on the recordings with any thoughts and feedback and questions you have. So I'm gonna proceed ahead because we're gonna try to accomplish in the simulator here, navigating to a details screen and testing for it. Bao says, I'm a senior UX, love this stuff. I'm really glad to have your perspective actually, because I am terrible at design and user interface and UX design, in my opinion. So I'm really using React Native Paper, a component library with off-the-shelf things, and I would not be surprised if there are plenty of user interface and user experience things that I could be doing better. So Bao Warrior or anyone else watching who has UI, UX experience would love any input of yours. As a personal project, I'm just going to my own personal standards of what is useful and helpful, but happy to learn more for myself or for the listeners to see how they can improve things. Okay, so what we want to accomplish here in our 30 minutes remaining, it might go fast, it usually never goes fast, is I want in my little drop-down menu here, which probably doesn't conform to material design specifications, but I don't mind that. In addition to mark read and delete, I also want an edit option that's going to navigate us to that screen. So that's not going to be too hard to add. It's going to be pretty straightforward, I believe. First, let's make the screen. And does it need to be a different screen for the unread or the read ones? I don't think it does. So I think that'll be a screen out here. I'm just going to make a new links. I'm conflating the terms links and bookmarks again, but that's because links is the externally facing URLs terms, but bookmark is what I'm using in the code. It's kind of a surprising thing. Yes. So in links, I'm going to call it bookmark detail screen. And now I have an option. I can go ahead and proactively create a folder for this screen, assuming I'm going to have child components, or I can leave it here and only wait to do that until it's needed. At this point, I'm pretty confident that I'm going to have a child components to extract because it's a more complicated screen in my opinion. So detail screen. So create a bookmark detail screen folder with an index.js. And all we're going to do here is export default function bookmark detail screen. I really just want to do the basics here, so I'm going to import text. I can at least import it from React Native Paper. And we're going to return text bookmark detail screen. And that's actually going to allow us to do the automated tests. Oh, no, it won't. Because of the way the testing works, that's not going to be needed. This is just going to let us, during manual testing, confirm that we got to the right screen. So we have this trivial component that nonetheless has a folder. Now let's go into the navigation, into the router to hook this screen up. We'll come back to linking in a second. And first we're going to go into here. If it's been a while, it's probably been a few sessions since you've seen this, but we have our drawer navigator for the application. This corresponds in React Navigation to this drawer here. And we're under the unread navigation screen. So under unread, it is unread up here. Takes us up there. And unread is a stack navigator. So we can have multiple screens that stack or push in underneath them. So currently we only have one screen under there, the unread screen. So let's make another. Unread screen dot stack dot screen. Name equals bookmark. Well, hang on. Am I going to regret? Well, we'll find out. I'm not sure if it's going to be a problem if we're reusing this later when we have a red stack, but that is in the future, and so we're not going to worry about that now. Component is bookmark detail screen, and we do need a title. I think we don't need, yeah, we do. Edit link. We don't need to fill in the details there. So we need this screen to be imported. Import bookmark detail screen from, is it under links? Nope. Yes. Bookmark detail screen. So now the screen is available there. Now we need to add linking up here, which is the way we configure React Navigation to have URLs that show on the web. So this will be bookmark detail screen. And this is going to be, oh yeah, we need some placeholders here. I need to pull up my other application, my previous one, so I can remember how to do this. Surely, Expo. So Surely, S-U-R-E-L-Y is the name of my to-do list app. It's a pun. Everything's a pun with me. But I implemented it in Expo for Web, and I'm following the pattern in it to build this second application in Expo for Web. Okay, so here we have links / unread and ID. If you've used any backend server-side framework, this is a very common pattern for configuring URLs so that this is a placeholder, so that whatever the ID value is of that link, it's what comes up in there. And that allows us to reload the page and stuff like that. It's very useful and helpful. So we're going to need to pass that ID in. Okay, so this should set up our navigation good enough. Now we need a menu item in our unread bookmark row to navigate us to there. So is a new menu item, and it's edit. On edit is going to be the function. It looks like based on the way we've configured this component, that's all passed in on edit. So let's go back out to the unread bookmark list. Now, but open bookmark I put in this component. So that's interesting. Maybe that's inconsistent. At least mark read and delete come from outside. So let's at least do on edit. Yeah. On edit, let's pass in from here. On edit equals handle edit item. So what do we want to do when we edit it? We want to navigate to the other screen. And the way we can do this in the hooks-based approach to React Navigation is use navigation. And I'm just checking my cheater import here to see how to get it. Import use navigation from React Navigation Native. So this is going to give us some navigation options. So this gives us navigation and handle edit. We're going to go navigation navigate. And you can navigate either by URL or by the name, but let's navigate by the name, I think, because I just feel like that's an easier way to pass in the ID. Navigate to the bookmark details screen. And I just got to look through here to see how I do that. Is that the route? No, that's destructuring. Navigation, navigate. Sorry about this, just pulling it out real quick. Interesting. Well, let's check the APIs, because I was actually doing the link to approach in the other app, but I think navigation navigate is good. Navigation. I think navigate though. navigate, name, params to pass the destination route. So I think the ID can just go directly under there. So I think what we want to do here is say ID bookmark.id. I think that's the ID we want to pass. And we'll be able to see this on, oh yeah, item ID. This should not be item. This should just say bookmark to be clearer. And we'll see this on the URL on the web at least before we have anything else to do with it. So I think this will allow us to navigate. So let's check it out. So we're on the unread screen. I think it refreshed there. The drop down, we have edit. Let's see. I would assume I probably got something wrong, but let's see and find out if that's the case. Click edit. We pushed in. It's showing bookmark detail screen, which was our tiny placeholder contents just to show us that we got to the right place. The title does say edit link, so that's nice. We have the back button here that takes us back because that's built into React Navigation and works very well. So this is looking good. Oh, interestingly, that's not dismissing. That menu's not dismissing. So I do want to fix that. I knew I did something wrong. Yeah, here we go. Hide menu as well. Hide menu and then navigate. Edit. Now it's hidden. That's a lot better. Great. Now let's check on the web to see if that URL works properly. Oh, I didn't merge this yet. Here's refreshing. Let's merge it down. It looks like I haven't committed anything yet. Let's go to main, pull, edit navigation, because we're just doing the navigation for now. Okay, all of our code is now there. All right, so we're here, we're on web. Let's just get rid of this. We've got edit, oh, and yeah, it's still, Safari is still bugging me by that lack of a full URL. I was using Safari for a long time, not a long time, but kind of a long time, because I was experiencing some wrist pain. And it has some good accessibility support. But my wrists are doing better. I'm very, 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 very thankful for that. But as a result, I'll probably go back to my Firefox as my main driver, and then we won't experience that problem. Oh, we got to sign in. Ooh, sign in does not have good URLs. Make a to-do about that. All right, we'll fix that next time, or maybe this time. So that's not what we want to see in the URLs. That does not look like normal. Sign in. We're on links unread. We got edit. Let's see what happens when we click edit. Links unread 59. Great. Links unread 44. Now, as a minor side note, oftentimes you don't want to have incrementing IDs as your IDs that are exposed for your backend and used. This is actually a private link app, so it's only used by me, and so there's not values there that are exposed to others. So that's actually fine. I'm not worried about that, and that's something that's on the back end. And if I change it on the back end and make those UUIDs instead, the front end will just work and just benefit from it. But we can see that by navigating to this screen, we're taken to a nice URL. And in one of the early sessions where I set it up to make sure we reload to the right place, let's check that that's happening. When I reload this page, I want to be taken to link 59, and I want the back button to still work. Let's see if that happens. We reload the page, we have the back button, we click back, and it takes us back to links unread. So that's just what we would expect. All right, so let's add, this is probably one commit. This is set up edit link to navigate to placeholder edit screen. So that's working well. So now let's think about testing this. How can we test on unread bookmark links clicking edit? What is it we expect to happen? So think about screen test. So unread screen test is testing unread screen by itself. So you might say, and I mean, it takes some flipping of your head to change your perspective. You might say, okay, I want to test that the screen that I get to is this one, the detail screen. I want to test that I'm on this URL and that this is what's being shown and stuff like that. But remember that our test, the screen test here is isolating. We're not running our whole app. We are only running unread screen. So if you isolate the test down to just what's within unread screen, which is still pretty big, what happens within that context? And what happens is not that a new screen is shown. What happens is navigation.navigate is called. And so this is what we're going to test. We're going to mock out navigation.navigate, and to make sure that navigation.navigate was called with bookmark detailed screen, etc., etc. So let me go check over to my code to make sure I can see how that was done. Navigate, because I didn't prepare this. Yeah, okay, so that's that. So that was passed in there. I could probably mock this. What I'd like to do is to mock this module and say mock use navigation to return the object that I specify. So I don't think I did exactly that in my last project, so this will be a nice little adventure together, and I hope it'll go well. So let's try to mock it out. What we're going to do is to jest.mock React Navigation Native, and we're going to have it return something. We want it to include use navigation. I want that to be a jest function, so we can mock out what it's actually returning. This is this. So let's find out. Let's actually collapse this down. Displaying links, refreshing, link clicking, adding a link, marking as read, deleting. So this is in the list. It's here. Describe, editing. Just edit. Let's say it. Am I using should in my test names? Navigates to the bookmark detail screen, which I could have called the edit bookmark screen. The detail screen will allow editing. That's okay. Okay, so let's copy a similar test mark read, because it also is allowing us to click something in the list. We find actions, we find mark as read. Okay. So we're mocking out HTTP. We've got a bookmark coming back. We don't need to mock out patch. Oh, this needs to be async. I always forget that. Some of these we might not need, but we're looking for actions, and then we're looking for the text edit and press it. So what happens after we click edit? We should think, well, first of all, I want to make sure that the menu is dismissed. So let me find that. Wait for element to be removed. Yeah, so I do want to dismiss that, and then I want to say expect navigation navigate to have been called with change me. Actually, I don't need to say change me in this case. I know what it should be called with. It should be called with bookmark detail screen, and the ID is the bookmark ID. So whatever bookmark the service is changing, I want to be passed in there. So now ESLint is telling me I don't know what navigation is. And so what I want to do is define a navigation object here. I want to say house navigation equals navigate is a function, jest function, a mock function, so we can make an assertion on it. And then I want to say, what is this? Use navigation. Oh yeah, I need to do an import up here. Import use navigation from here. And this import is going to give me our mocked use navigation, where we can then say here, hopefully, use navigation mock return value navigation. So when our code calls navigation, use navigation, we get this object back. Then when we call navigate, nothing happens, but we're checking what we call navigate to happen to check that this call happens. So let's run only this test. This time I wrote a whole long test before testing the run, so I'll probably regret that. 11 minutes, we can make it. It says that it passed. Again, don't ever test it. Always need to verify. So let's break this functionality to make sure that it happens. So first of all, actually there's two parts. So let's break both parts and see if both parts of the test will error out for us. You want every expectation or check in your test to fail at some point to show you that it's really testing and checking and ensuring what you expect it is. All right, timed out and wait for element to be removed. So mark red. Oh, mark red is not really the most direct thing we should be checking because that's not related. We're clicking edit. So we're making sure edit is present. So we want to make sure that edit is removed. So actually, by making sure that assertion failed, I was able to improve my test just now by not coupling to something that's unrelated to the immediate test. More directly, we're saying, look for edit, click on it, and make sure it goes away. Now it says, timed out and wait for element to be removed, edit. I expect now that if I add hide menu back in, that should now pass. That assertion should pass, and the next failure should happen. Let's see. Expected this function navigation navigate to have been called. Expected this, but got that instead. Now this is actually, well, let me not go down that rabbit trail. Cool. So this expectation of removing edit is working, but navigation.navigate is not being called. And so, just to be a little bit extra, let's call navigation.navigate with this is wrong and make sure that the test still fails. All right, it expected bookmark detail screen ID 1 to be passed, but instead this is wrong was passed. So now if we call navigation.navigate here, bookmark detail screen with the ID, this should work. Our test pass. I'm gonna open back up the full suite. In the meantime, I'm gonna manually test it again to make sure we're okay. I haven't broken it by my messing around. Edit, we're taken to that screen. And there's a back, which we're not testing the back just yet. Our tests are all passing. Great, so this is good. Let me get this committed. Test unread list edit functionality. So let's step back and take a look at this again. The unread screen spec is a screen test that's testing the unread screen in isolation from everything else. One of the reasons we're doing that is because React Navigation has native code that we're not able to test in a React Native testing library test because it only runs JavaScript. So we narrow a test just the scope of an entire unread screen. And when we think about testing this component, testing this screen, we're thinking about the inputs and outputs. A lot of the times the inputs are what the user interacts with and outputs is what's shown on the screen. But another output is a request made to a server. And another input is the data coming back from the server as we've mocked out here. And one other output that comes out, well, one of them here actually just so happens I've scrolled to here. Another output that comes out of the screen is these calls to linking.openURL. So our test was not testing that a browser was launched, it tests that we called linking.openURL. And in the same way with edit, we're testing that the output of this screen is a call to navigation.navigate. That is a call back up into the broader application code, into the native code that we've seen from our manual testing is going to actually navigate you to the right place. But when you narrow down just to the scope of the unread screen itself, those concerns about navigation are what's happening. All that screen is responsible for is calling this method with the right values, and the responsibility of the rest of the code is to do the navigation. So this isn't a hack that is making it unrealistic in our code. What it is our code is narrowed down to the scope of unread screen. And within the scope of unread screen, this is precisely what happens. Nothing more and nothing less. So this is a really good test for the screen test. And if you're following the screen test approach, this is what you're going to be doing a lot of is these calls to navigate you to direct you around the app, and you'll be checking that the right call to navigate happened, and that isolates you from other places. Yeah. So I think we're good. I think our editing navigation works. And so I think we're actually done the unread screen for now. So let's go ahead and push this up. It was really just 2 commits here. Was there something else? There was something else. Let's see if I can sneak it in. I always cheat and try to sneak stuff in, but let's sneak it in. Let's not. The fixing those sign-in screen URLs. I'll do it next time because that would be nice to have it on a separate PR anyways. So I'm going to push up this pull request. Edit navigation. And if this was a publicly deployed app, we might not want to make this live right away. Maybe it would be behind a feature flag or something like that. But because we're just building it internally here, and I'm the only audience anyways, it's okay to go ahead and put this in. So while CI is running, you all can believe that the CI will pass and I can merge it down and be good to go. So I think we can end it there. All right, so let's review what we did today. And I got to look at my list to see what we did today. We built two things. Well, three things, right? I don't know what's happening. I'm just going as fast as I can. Yeah, we did three things. So first, on the basis of the tests we had from before, we took some refactoring we had done previously, splitting out a big component into child components, and we did a further refactor, extracting those functions to a new file. And that, I don't know if that's an official refactoring in the refactoring book list, but in JavaScript it sure is a common one, is extracting something, some bit of code, from one module to a separate module to split it out. And we got benefit there from making those files easier to explore and look around in. And we also got to see the dependencies more clearly. Like just by the imports at the top of the file, we got to see what things each component was or wasn't working with, and it helped affirm to us that these components are well focused and each having a single responsibility or closer to a single responsibility. Because we had these integration tests, these screen tests that test all the JavaScript for a certain screen together, we were able to take small steps in that refactoring with confidence that everything was still working. So once we finished that refactor, we implemented refreshing. And with refreshing, we saw a behavior difference between web and mobile. And I'll go back to the screen for that real quick, where we saw that on mobile, we could pull to refresh, and that worked great, but that's not actually enabled on web, and it wouldn't be intuitive if it was. And instead on web, we implemented a reload button that shows up separately with a separate loading indicator. We took advantage of that loading indicator to set up an initial loading as well, so that we weren't seeing the no items message, and we saw a nice indicative loading indicator. And as we did that, we saw a pattern for when a component has some state and you've got a prop coming in from outside to control it from outside as well, instead of changing that state, you can just have a derived data value that says is making a decision based on local state that is not changed from outside and based on the past and prop and making a decision together. So that set up our reloading, which is going to be really helpful for me personally as I do a personal build of this app to be able to use as I've been using on my phone day to day. And the last thing we did is we started to move towards having a separate screen, an edit screen for components. And as you just saw, we implemented this edit link to navigate to this placeholder screen, which next time, let me not talk about next time in a second. And we showed how to test this, how to do a screen test of components like this that are doing navigation to elsewhere, and how the right thing that we want to test is not that another screen appears, but because we can't test that, but instead what we tested that the right call to navigator.navigate was made. And that succeeded. And let's see if during my rambling the test has passed. It has, so we can merge it down and be good to go. Right after the stream, I'm going to bump up the build version. I'm going to deploy it to web and get the build started to deploy it to mobile, so I have my test build as well. What are we going to do next time? So next time we're going to implement, next week, I'm thinking about changing up the schedule to go during a different day during a week to mix things up. So we'll see. Keep an eye, subscribe on Twitch to get an update, or check on codingitwrong.com, or follow me on social media. But the next stream, next week, whatever time it is, whatever day it is, what we're going to do is we're going to implement that edit screen. At least enough to show the basics of it, of pulling that data out of the prop to get the ID, loading that record, showing it, allowing it to be edited and saved, and everything like that. The other thing we're going to do, if we have time, as I think is likely, on a previous session, we had some lower level utility code to do authentication and configure a call to the backend. And that is something that we mocked out in our test. And so I want to go back and add testing coverage there so that we know that that code could be tested as well, and we can get some good coverage. So we're going to do that. And I think with that, this time I'm thinking that'll be the last test of our main series here. The last session of our main series, and we'll call Building for Mobile and Web with Expo complete. Just to wrap this up, so this is a nice self-contained series that others can do. But have no fear, the streams are not ending, and we're going to continue on from there. So I have a whole brainstorm list of different things that we can do in future series. So that can include extracting some shared libraries from our React Expo app here. Oops, I'm accidentally opening Discord. Go away, Discord. We can extract some libraries like UI libraries and authentication libraries. We can start playing around with performance of our Expo web app. Check out Lighthouse, see if we can split up bundles to get the performance better. I'm interested in potentially trying Detox, the end-to-end testing tool, to get it working on CI or get it working in Expo, I guess would be the highest priority. Or maybe just on CI in general for a React Native CLI app. We can also broaden out. React Server components are a new technology I want to explore. I would love, this app has Rails in the backend, but I'd love to get more familiar with Express.js and apply some of these testing techniques to the server side and build the stack so that my Express stack is ready the next time I want to build the server-side app that I can reach for Express. I also have a lot of interest in code in the browser tools like Code Sandbox and Glitch and Replit. And there's some other tools, including sort of a notebook-based tool that I've been informed of. And these other tools to kind of achieve the same values we're trying to accomplish here with Expo, of building at a high level of abstraction, providing high turnaround to be able to be really productive, to build apps for ourselves to meet our needs. So there's a lot of possible things we could do in future streams for anyone who wants to check in. I'll be posting publicly to let folks know what the topics are going to be in advance. But if you want to stay in touch with me and find out about these things, the best way to do it is to go to codingitwrong.com. And I guess if you're on Twitch or YouTube, you can also follow me there. That's another good way to do it, to find out. But Coding It Wrong is going to have notes in advance of what streams are happening. Twitch will have the schedule in advance, and I'll keep that accurate. You can follow my blog with RSS. I'm not on commercial social media, but you can follow me on Mastodon. I am on LinkedIn. Got a job, got to be on LinkedIn. So Mastodon or LinkedIn, you can connect with me on codingitwrong.com. But please stay in touch to let me know. Bow Warrior and Fimion, thank you so much for joining in the chat. Thanks for jumping in. Would love to hear in the chat here or through some other communication mechanism any ideas or feedback you have, what kind of things you've been working on and how they work out for you. But thanks for joining in the chat. Thanks anyone who's participating in the YouTube comments. I appreciate it. And we will be back next week with another stream. And I think if it's a 1 hour stream during the day, we might not get to the end. But we're within 1 or 2 streams, probably within 2 hours of finishing up building for mobile and web with Expo. So thanks so much for joining in. I appreciate it. And we'll catch you next time. See ya. Still trying to see ya. Okay, there it is. See ya.